conflict around the world. Right now, in the spotlight is Israel and the Palestinians.
Across the Middle East, thousands taking to the streets in multiple countries protesting the escalating violence in Gaza.
Worse. Just in the last day, we announced that one of our colleagues lost her only son in an airstrike in Rafah yesterday.
Square that leads up to the American embassy, which is about half a mile up the hill from there. They were trying to break through a barrier set up.
Before then was Russia and Ukraine. Before that was India and Pakistan. And just before that was Armenia, Azerbaijan, and before that, and before that, and before that. There's always going to be conflict happening. One thing I've noticed though, many people have questioned, why aren't Pacific Islanders protesting and petitioning for the Palestinians to be freed? Why aren't we, the Melanesians in the Pacific, doing something to try and assuage the situation? The truth is, we already have a conflict that's been brewing for the past 50 years. Now, I know Israel and Palestinians, they have more mileage with this, with almost, well, just over 70 years. But what I'm talking about is West Papua and Indonesia. And this is not a competition of whose conflict is more brutal, whose conflict is the oldest, but in international relations, sometimes there's an obvious hypocrisy.
It's maybe being a hypocrite is what it is.
And we've been singing this song and we'll continue to sing it till the cows come home. Vanuatu has been a strong advocate for West Papua. We even have a representative. I drink kava with him a lot of times, and he's got a lot of inspiring things to say, a lot of new ideas. But whenever there's a new conflict, every other past conflict is usually forgotten, usually pushed to the side, usually brushed away, swept under the rug. Barack Obama mentioned probably 10, 11 years ago, when he was having his first or second term, that the situation in Israel is detrimental and the Palestinians need to be freed.
When settler violence against Palestinians goes unpunished, it's not right to prevent Palestinians from farming their lands or restricting a student's ability to move around the West Bank or displace Palestinian families from their homes. Neither occupation nor expulsion is the answer.
The Palestinians need to be freed. I believe that as well. Free Palestine. Stop the war with Ukraine and Russia. Allow the Armenians to come out of the gates of Azerbaijan. India and Pakistan can broker a peace deal. And West Papua can finally be an independent country from Indonesia. There's a lot of things that we want. There's a lot of things we hope for. There's a lot of things we wish. There's a lot of voices in between. But which voices are heard? Right now, the voice of we need to be free. We don't want to live in a country or a state that's currently being bombarded by missiles after missiles. We don't want Israel to invade us and massacre a lot of innocent civilians as collateral damage for the actions of a few radicalized militants. This is a big issue, and I have to admit, it's not unfair for me to hold it in comparison with what's happening in West Papua and Indonesia. Just because there's not enough media attention to it, just because it's not making international headlines, or it's not continuously making international headlines, or the leader of that country is not threatening to basically wipe out 2 million people or even hold them hostage just to grab the eyes of international media, just because this is not being covered well enough in West Papua doesn't mean that it's not the same. And I may be playing to my bias because I'm a Melanesian and I'm from the Pacific and we look out for each other. But I just wish that it wasn't so unfair and it wasn't the way it is now. No matter how much we scream at the United Nations, no matter how much we protest, no matter how much we talk, sometimes we feel like our brothers in West Papua are like the Palestinians who are voiceless, who are forced to turn to guerrilla warfare just for their own survival. And I do hope that the Palestinians can find a peaceful resolution with the Israelites. Let's move over to rugby. This is the Rugby World Cup. Every 4 years it happens. Fiji, very disappointing, went out. England came in, clawing, biting, just by the skin of their teeth. They made it through. South Africa. I have no idea what's going on with my phone, but I have been receiving a lot of South African highlights from the winger all the way up to Faf. I must admit, the Springboks do have an incredible chance of winning. And yeah, I actually have a love for green now. My team, obviously, was Fiji and Australia. But Australia, they lost so bad. Man, I had to distance myself from the Wallabies so far. I landed with Argentina. Now that's a hell of a jump. Argentina going against the All Blacks could have been a Cinderella story, one of the biggest upsets. Now, hats off to Argentina for making it this far. An incredible team. But one memory I have to admit, it was shared by a friend of mine on social media, was when Portugal beat Fiji, just by 1 point. Portugal beat Fiji, and when they went back to their home country at the airport, family, friends, fans gave them a standing ovation. It was almost divine, and it reminded me of how the Fijian boys are welcome when they come home. It's nice to see when it happens to other countries, because sometimes we see that, we feel like us Melanesians or us Pacific Islanders, we play a sport so passionately. Sometimes we feel like we've adopted this sport and we're the only ones who feel this way. And just seeing another country enjoy it the way we enjoy it, it's a wholesome feeling. Finally, I'll end this podcast on something very controversial. Now, Donald Trump, yep, the gingerbread man, this guy, I was never a fan of him. I was never a fan of the Don. It was so despicable that people from other countries would mock the United States of America because of him. There weren't any filters. He would post anything he'd want to post up on Twitter. But right now, after all that, I have to admit, I am now a fan of the Don. Pigs must be flying, because this guy is saying the right things. He's got a lot of black supporters. There's a lot of so-called truths about Donald Trump that's being debunked. When I think of Donald Trump, I think of, to compare him with a Pacific Island leader, I think of Bainimarama. Once again, never a fan of the man. He made a lot of positive changes, and I became a huge fan of Bainimarama, and I held him to a regard because I was thankful for the decisions he made, the national policies he set up, the different regulations he enforced, which allowed a lot of young kids to go to school, including some of my nephews and nieces. So he's in my good books. And I have to admit, Donald Trump followed the same path. It took a little bit for him to refine his ways, his choice of words, but the Don is right up there, and he's pushing some strong narrative. Donald Trump is a right-wing conservative from the Republican Party, and he vows that he will not put up with the trans movement. He will put an end to the trans woke movement. But someone like Donald Trump, if he does win, he will make some substantial changes. And it would be nice to have a shell of kava with the Don. And we here in the Pacific, we need someone like Donald Trump and Bainimarama. And it's not just me saying it. I've heard it from a number of people. We need a leader who is strong, a leader who will look after their people first before focusing on the needs of the others. It may sound bad, it may sound unfair, it may even sound cruel. But we put these leaders in places where they are currently. We, the people, have voted them in power. So they need to do right by us. And at most times, it never happens. And Vanuatu, like Fiji, like PNG and Solomon Islands, and our Polynesian and Micronesian brothers, we all have our issues. There's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of misappropriation, there's a lot of scandals. Now, speaking firsthand, being at the forefront of most of this reporting in Vanuatu, I can say that it is appalling. And that's why I've made this podcast, where I will be talking about a lot of these issues that we have in country, and not just politics, sports, the scandals. Don't get me started with the potholes on the roads. We'll get towards that as well. Anyways, this is the first episode of Pacific Podcast. Let's talk about it with Mavuku.